FA presents The Inner Circle.
And away we go!
Starring Coach Ant and Coach Rel.
How y'all doing today? Welcome to another episode of Our Friendly Advice. As you know, my name is Minister Ant.
I am Coach Rel, and today we have a special guest.
Reverend Amber Scott.
Okay.
All right.
Said minister, yes.
Hi. How you doing? How you feeling?
I'm great.
You feeling good?
Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday.
How are you?
I'm just happy to be here. Grateful. You know what I mean? Just happy to be here. As you know, this is the hot seat. So on the hot seat, we're gonna ask you, some questions. We're gonna unpack your life, unpack some trauma, talk about emotional intelligence, health equity, whatever we decide to get into. And here's the thing, though. You
Okay.
can pass on a question,
Yes.
but we just gonna figure out another way to ask it. All right?
Until we answer the question.
Until we get down to that.
I
Yeah.
respect it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Getting
so I guess we could just pop it off. What's your favorite Bible verse?
Ooh. My favorite Bible verse is Psalm 46. Be still and know that I am God. And it was my favorite verse for a long time, but it really became solidified in the pandemic as the pandemic was starting and we were forced to slow down. So yeah, I've been rocking with it
Okay, so that
for
been
a
getting you
long
through.
time. That's what
Okay.
I live according to. I think life gets so hectic and busy, especially with me. I'm doing a lot of different things between like ministry and sports and community work. And so I have to remind myself to slow down and truly be still and just experience the goodness of God all around us. So
All right.
yeah, I got a tattoo and everything.
Okay.
I don't forget it.
All
Yeah.
right. Amen. All right.
What is your biggest message in the church right now? Who are you trying to speak to?
Whew. I mean, I can start with what I preached about today.
Okay.
Does that work? So today I spoke about doubt and how, especially as a Black church, sometimes people may force us, or people may encourage us to second guess ourselves and our gifts and our ability. And I tied it into doubting Thomas, right? And so we're in Eastertide, right? Obviously Easter was last Sunday, and so one thing that really strikes me about that text is, we have all the glory and the triumph of resurrection on this Sunday, but then after the fact, the disciples still didn't fully believe, right? That Jesus actually rose. And Thomas in particular was like, well, let me see, I need to see the scars until I believe. And so I tied that back to the fact that sometimes we let doubt, whether it be doubting ourselves, doubting those who've been placed in our lives to bless us, or doubting that God is constantly got us and always around us, stand in the way of our blessings and what we're called to do. And then I also tied it back to how, again, going back, I pastor a Black church, predominantly Black church, how society sometimes has made us feel less than as a community, to the point where we might second guess some of our gifts, or have imposter syndrome, or doubt the spaces that we're supposed to be in. But the beauty of the resurrection in the Eastertide season that we're in is God outweighs all of that, and Jesus outweighs all of that. And so because Jesus defeated all that doubt, death, and sin, we can live into our full flourishing. So that's one of the messages that I'm preaching right now.
Going into that message of doubt, it ties into my next question.
Okay.
What do you think the biggest weakness this generation faces right now between men and women?
Just one
You
thing?
can list them off.
Whatever you got.
Whatever you got.
I think instant gratification, like constantly seeking instant gratification and satisfaction, which that's one thing. I don't think it's not all of our faults, right? It's just technology, obviously, social media, all these things that we have at our fingertips. Now we have a chat, GBT, and AI, and all these things where you can get things so quickly. But I think we've become a people where we're so used to having answers or having knowing what the end goal is or the outcome, right? Just having instant gratification no matter what the thing is. So I think that's a huge challenge. Humanizing one another. And I will say, I look at like the younger generation, and I think like what are they, Z?
Z, I think so, yeah.
I think they're doing a better job of this, but I look at like, I'm millennial. Are y'all millennials? I know I'm a little bit older than you. Are you?
I think I'm a millennial.
Are you?
I'm 92.
I'm a millennial.
You're a millennial?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, cool. So I look at our generation. I think there are points where we got away from like just looking each other in the eye if you're walking down the street, or like you're getting on this. I work in New York City. If you're getting on the subway, just like a nod or saying hello, right? Like we just forget to humanize. And I think it's more exacerbated in certain, depending on the regions that you're in. Like, you know, my family is from Alabama originally, and you know, I think there is a thing as Southern hospitality where people still acknowledge each other, and you say hey and you wave even if you don't know the person. But you come back to like New Jersey where I currently live, or New York where I work, and people don't, if you say hello to someone, they'll look at you like you're crazy. If you don't know them, I mean. And so, yeah, I think a simple just like humanization of someone, whether it be a hello, whether it be if you're starting a meeting, like I'm really intentional about this. Like my team knows if I'm starting a meeting, how are you doing? What's going on in your life? Like, who are you as the person before we just dive into the work, or like, you know, what can I give to you, or what can I receive from you, right? Like the humanity. So
to add to your point, I was just in my life, seeing through my spectrum, we used to have a lot more barbecues. So people used to host barbecues. I remember like me being young, somebody's older brother or cousin would have a barbecue. We would go over there, they'd introduce us, and we'd move on. I feel like my generation, of my age, we don't have barbecues no more. Unless so-and-so's mother is throwing an event.
But we're that new generation.
We're that generation where we're supposed to be doing the barbecue.
Right.
Yes.
I know for a fact
So now
I've never thrown a barbecue.
Shoes. Do you have your grilling shoes?
So,
You know what I'm talking about?
yeah, the dad shoes.
Yeah,
You
I
got
got an air fryer.
Yeah, you got.
No, wait.
I got an air fryer. The
So
good one.
we gotta do better, because I've never thrown a barbecue, so I know I'm part of the problem as well. Like I'm, you know.
But that's where a lot of community happens, right? And like whether it be with, I look at our parents, you know, existing friends that they have, or like, you know, you might meet new friends that way, right? Just inviting people over. But yeah, I do agree. I think barbecues, cookouts are a huge place where fellowship can happen.
I think there's a few things. I was literally just talking to just a couple of ministry leaders about this. And I think we in a space where we operate in two things: individualism and consumerism.
Yes.
So how the world just kind of curated itself over time is you don't necessarily have to have accountability nowadays. You can form your own subgroup of whatever you believe in, and people won't just coddle to whatever you say.
Exactly. And like with set beliefs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's nobody,
and not be challenged.
Nobody gonna push towards it. Therefore, you'll be surprised. Like the average person, if you was to ask them, when the last time you apologized? They get blurry in the room. All of a sudden, nobody remember, right? Like when the last time you actually, because here's one thing that I see in just ministry spaces. If you struggle to apologize, you probably struggle to repent.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one thing. The other thing is consumerism, right? So the world just looked like a big mall. Everybody shopping, but shopping for something different. Nobody on the same page, but it's just a lot of people. So it looked like, oh, it's popping over there. Or it looked like it's lit over there. It's popular, acceptance, validation, all of that live over there. But if everybody is in there on a different agenda, are you really as close as you say? Right? That's my main issue. So in those two things, right?
Yeah.
Like community can't exist if you don't have a common goal. If you don't have something to kind of build around, then what? You got neighbors who used to watch the kids if the mom or dad couldn't make it on time. They had each other phone numbers.
Yeah.
They might even punish them, right? However that go. Put them on timeout.
A village.
A village.
Yeah.
Now, I read this quote one time. It said a kid will burn down a village just to feel its warmth. I'm watching kids burn down villages every day because the villages don't exist
shouting
anymore.
for help,
So
right?
now it's
And
attention,
yeah.
those things. So now, like even to our last pod when we was talking to the teachers, the educators, is there such thing as a bad kid if there's no village to teach them the way? And this is bleeding into also.
Is that a rhetorical question or can we answer?
No,
I don't know. There's not, right? Like I think, and by no means I don't work in child development or education, but I do think the nature versus nurture conversation is a real thing, and I believe in the nurturing. Like obviously there are some things that are just intrinsic to a person, but yeah, like it's up to the adults, it's up to the village, it's up to those who would be responsible for the nurturing aspect. Like yeah.
I'm gonna push back on what you just said because we have a disagreement. You said you're not in the educational or child development. You are because you minister, and people are, and you're a woman. So that means someone at some time is looking at you and is looking at you as a role model and seeking guidance from you. And just from your daily habits is what they're going to see, and they're going to aspire to be like you, especially from
I receive that.
Yeah, all the titles you've hit in such a short amount of time. You've accomplished a lot. So people are going to aspire to want, especially kids are going to want to know and be more in tune with you. Going off what you both said, what I've seen in the kids space, because I deal with kids a lot, is this channel of influence. They want to be so influential that they'll put themselves in harm's way. Things that we would never do as kids, they're willing to do to get clout, right?
That's like their currency.
That's their currency.
Yes.
Like we used to do, like we'll go mow a lawn, we'll go shovel some snow, we'll go do something to earn money. They're putting that aside and they're using their own mind and body to do whatever they can to get clout. There's kids that are losing. I don't know if you've seen it, but Subway Surfer is like a game.
Yeah, I seen
it became a big thing, and then on TikTok, kids started actually doing the game. So they would go into the train stations and run on the tracks and run in and try and dip in and out of the trains coming. A couple kids got caught by the train, and lost their lives and things of that nature, or lost a limb. So, but it isn't like the stupidity doesn't stem from the actual cause, because they knew some of the actions that happened. It was how popular can I get? And that's the scary thing about this generation. They're looking at whatever can be done to make my numbers climb, because it's the insecurities. So if I want you to speak on what you've seen going through, even in the church, or like what have you seen through people that they're willing to chase down through their insecurities?
I have to sit with that a little bit more. I think I do agree, like seeing especially young people in terms of like that being their currency. I could see that. That makes sense. I think in some of the things I've seen in the church, maybe around like relationships and actually no, I don't know. I don't know if I have an answer for that.
So where are you going with the relationship portion? Where was your mind taking you to on that?
Well, I wouldn't say this happens in my church, and this is a whole other dynamic. Being a woman senior pastor, I think there are different dynamics than men have. But it's interesting. I was actually just at a conference in Atlanta this past week, and some of my colleagues were talking about how women sometimes can be the most critical of women preachers. And when you don't have a senior pastor who's a woman, women a lot of times can be, and I'm not saying all, but this is kind of just like an observation that my colleague made, will be the ones that push back. And I was like, really? Like, I mean, I know that, but like, why? So we were sitting with it. And the point that she brought up was fascinating. She was like, well, think about it. Like, people may look to their pastor to be the idol of the relationships that they, whether they have it or not, but the relationships that they would hope to have, right? So like you have, maybe like your grannies of the church who are like, oh, pastor, like I cooked you this cake. And, but it's the validation, right, of the pastor, especially nobody ever brings me a cake, right, as a woman, right? But it's maybe the validation of, that man saying, oh yeah, like sister so and so, like that cake was great, or oh, my pastor looks good up there in that pulpit, or like, oh, this first family, like they look amazing. And so I guess what I'm saying is, for good or for bad, because I do think there's power to having an example, not the example, right, of what relationships and families can be. But I think sometimes we might put too much weight in putting ministers, senior ministers, etc., on a pedestal and idolizing that and creating another version of idolatry, when God doesn't call us to do that. So I don't know if that's really answering your question, but like I don't think that happens in my individual church per se, but I have seen that as a collective church where you get so caught up in idolatizing the preacher versus building your own relationship with God.
I have seen that as well.
Yeah.
And I always make sure, to those that I disciple, I make sure to let them know, let's start here. God gifted the church with leaders, right?
Yeah.
And I believe that it should be a interdependency, not a codependency, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like the leaders is there to make sure, we guide, we cultivate, we make sure people's souls is, being sustained, things of that nature, while teaching them how to study the word and be disciples, go out, make disciples.
Mm-hmm.
But I find a lot of times when those like foundational pieces is not taught right, then it builds a codependency at that point, because and it's also dangerous for the leader, because now you're not operating off of responsibility, you operating out of power, privilege, status, influence.
Yep.
So you one step away from being a cult leader if you don't do this thing under God
it's
correctly.
Delicate. Yep.
So there it go, and that's why we held double account, because of the position that we was called to. Also, I would like to say this too. I believe that because people, I don't want to say this, just say it. Because leaders don't answer their call right away, they leave a vacancy for other people to take the spot. So I believe that there are leaders right now, currently, there are pastors and ministers and teachers that was not called to it.
Yeah, sometimes people call themselves.
Absolutely. And I think that's just where we are.
Yes.
Which to push to full circle to what you were saying about popularity. Now imagine this. Imagine you look up and now you give yourself a self-title, right? All of a sudden, you tomorrow you're Apostle Darrell, and now you building this cult following around yourself with you got no guidance, you got nobody that's examining you, you don't know how to study the word, you just in there winging it, but because you got charisma or you sound a certain way, you know how to articulate yourself, now people looking for you for all the answers.
You have all these lives in your hands.
In your hands, and now you got sheep blood on your hands because and you the reason why the sheep is scattered because you don't know what you're doing or what you're talking about. So I think that plays into it too.
Yeah, and I think like that's a whole other thing. I can relate to people not answering their call. Like I look at my journey, like my brother knows this. I grew up in the church. We grew up in the church. I always knew I felt most like myself in the church, but child, I ran from my calling like for a while. You have some preachers who are like, at the age of 5, I was preaching and all these things. I knew I was going to be in ministry, but I ran from it. And, but finally, God's going to find you and won't let up until, you do what you're supposed to do. But yeah, people do run from the calling. And I actually think that might go back to like the self-doubt I was talking about earlier and a plethora of other things. But yeah.
So let's put that on the shelf for a second. Let's get into your actual occupation.
Okay.
So like, what do you do? Explain. Just break it
so
down.
like all of it, like secular,
secular space,
both secular and okay, cool.
Just break it down. Like, just let us know. Like, what do you do?
Yeah. So I'll start with the secular work. So I work at the National Basketball Association. I am really, really honored because I think it's a dope job and I'm grateful. So I lead all of our social justice work, all of our community work across the issue areas of civic engagement, so voter engagement, voting rights, making sure we're advocating across those areas, DEI inclusion, so anything around like key cultural moments, I'm leading that work. So think like AA, we're about to enter into AAPI month. How is the NBA showing up for that community? Black History Month, MLK, like I'm leading all that work. And then on top of that, I lead our HBCU work at the NBA. And really just like my thing is when I took this job a few years ago, it's no secret that most of our fans, our hardcore fans in particular at the NBA, are Black and brown young people. So how can I, from the inside out, like the inside being at the league, make sure the resources and the finances and the billions of dollars that this league generates actually impacts young people in communities that look like us in a positive way. So that's like at the very high level what I'm doing with my work.
What is, in your own words, what does DEI mean? Like, to give it, because there's a bunch of, so right now, you know, it's a huge topic across the country.
Yeah.
And it's
Very hot topic.
And it's, I think multiple people have multiple perspectives on it.
Mm-hmm.
Some people see it as a good thing. Some people see it as a bad thing. Could you break it down in your
my opinion? And I will say, just to be clear, this is Amber speaking, right? You gotta
give disclaimer.
Disclaimer,
not right
disclaimer, not the NBA. This is Amber Nicole Scott. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So for me, it's two parts. One, it's the equity building, and I specifically use equity versus equality because, you know, equity means not only are you getting access to the same spaces as, you know, what the majority might be, you know, cisgender white males, right? But you're also having the tools, right, to elevate you to be on the same playing field, right? So I'll give an example. A few years ago, we launched a program called the HBCU Fellowship. It's an internship program. Yeah, it's an internship program for undergrad and graduate HBCU students. And so one thing that I was really, really keen on when we built this program a few seasons ago was, all right, it's not just bringing these young people to work at the NBA and like across our 30 teams. We have to make sure from an equitable standpoint that they don't have any barriers to access, meaning we're going to make sure we're paying for their housing, right? We're going to make sure we're giving them a stipend on top of their salary. And I will say, like, you know, there are other internship programs that we've had where we didn't think about it like that because, let's be honest, a lot of times people who may be in those programs, they already have the resources to be able to move to New York City for the summer and, you know, be able to work in the industry. And so I think that is a very tangible example of how you're creating an equitable opportunity because you're eliminating barriers to entry to then create an even more diverse space. So for me, like, it's two parts. It's the diversity. So then making sure that, all the voices are in the room, but then making sure there's no barriers to entry, and that's the equitable piece.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you find any time, like, while building out these programs, they sound amazing. Do you feel as though, like, there's a desire issue from the young people to want to be a part of it? Or do you find that, no, once we build it out correctly, people going to flock towards it because we build up the systems the way it's supposed to?
Yeah. I think people do flock. I think, yeah.
Okay. So okay. So like, as much as we say the audience is like young Black, brown boys or just people for the NBA, it's also white owners.
Yes.
Right. Is that ever a barrier? Do they play with the budget? Do you find them kind of being disassociated all the way from the work that you do because of who you serve?
I'll be honest, I can't get into all of the ins and outs because we're teetering. We teetering. Gotta make sure I have a job tomorrow.
I don't want to get you fired.
But what I will say is, and this is public knowledge, right? And this is not just the NBA. This is any NFL, sports league, right? So I'll say this: at the end of the day, the bosses are the owners. That's just the way anybody can read it. Our collective bargaining agreement. That's just the way it works. The owners are the bosses. They're even Adam Silver's boss, right? So they're our boss. And so I say all that to say, yeah, they're close to things, and they're you know, they're controlling what they want to control and things of that nature. And so, but there are checks and balances that come into play. So you have the National Basketball Players Association, so the union, right? And so that's the players union then is able to push back on things, able to make sure there's checks and balances. But when it comes to the league itself, the owners are the...
Okay, so it's politics there. All right.
But that's all I can say on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question on the kids. Do they get to actually meet you?
Yes, we actually just had some amazing, we had about 20 students who came to our office 2 weeks ago for the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, which is a HBCU serving nonprofit organization. They came into the NBA office for an entire week, and there were 20 students. They hosted, we put together some pitch questions, so business questions for them, and yeah, they solve like pressing NBA business issues, and I don't know how they did it in like 2 or 3 days, pitched on like the 4th day, and they were brilliant. And so yes, so we get to work with young people all the time, which is great. So whether it's bringing them into our office or like going out into the community.
I was going to say that's what just that opportunity is very influential in itself. And I don't know if you know what it means, because I deal with the kids. Sometimes they get into programs and they don't get to meet the people that put this together. And you are that. So without you, wherever they spawn and go off into life and create, a part of that is because of you. And it's really influential. To me, it's great that they got to meet you, because now they can put a face to the name. And then not only that, when they get to a space that they become, well off, they can now be that person, because then they're more inclined to be that way because they met you. It's hard to, I think one of the hard things that me and Anthony deal with when we deal with kids is that when we go into these programs, they hear that people care, but they don't get to see them
right, all the time.
So it's like, this program was created, but it kind of seems like a welfare program. There's nobody that's here to,
like true relationship building.
Exactly.
With them.
So that's why I asked that question, because it really does resonate with them. And it's, whether you know it or not, just that week of 5 days or whatever you put into it, just that 5 minutes of you being there and say, hey, this is me, not to brag, not from a humble position. It's like, I try to do this for you.
I care about you. Yeah, and I want you to. And I think that just goes back to one of the first questions you asked, what's needed in the world right now, the humanization, right? Like, I think no matter what your vocation is, sometimes we get so caught up in like the rat race and all these different things, and you forget, there's people that you're, no matter what, I'm a strong believer in this, no matter what your vocation is, you're serving somebody in some way. Absolutely. Right? And so like, if you're able to remember that and humanize whomever is on the other end of whatever that service may be, it's important. So yes, I appreciate you naming that.
And I definitely want to say thank you on behalf of them, just because it's it's dope.
That's
so definitely
sweet.
Dope.
Yeah.
Let's reverse engineer this a little bit. So we speaking about all these amazing accolades that you have, you being a dope person. So let's back up into your childhood.
Oof.
Let's go here.
Next,
so, just tell us about your household, just generally. Like, how many siblings did you grow up with? Did you have mom and dad? Like, just walk us through, like, what was the day in the life of you as a, let's see, 10, 11-year-old? I don't know.
Yes, this is why, Darrell, I should have mentioned this to you. We should have got my brother and sister on the podcast. We'll have to do a part 2.
Definitely. So
we can get them on here. Yeah. So I want to hear from...
I've been trying to get your brother on.
I know, I've heard. He's being shy. He's not shy. So when I talk about our family, I always, and I mentioned it already, but I always start with the fact that both of our parents are from Troy, Alabama. I think that's important because though my siblings and I were reared in New Jersey, we were very much reared with Southern roots, right? Even in New Jersey. And so both of my parents, I start with my parents because they're amazing, amazing people. We're birthed out of a love that started in high school. They're high school sweethearts.
Oh, God.
And they went to prom together. Our dad was obsessed with our mom. literally, and went to college together. We're a Crimson and Cream household, so Delta. My mom's a soror of mine, so Delta. Our dad is a Kappa, and so I start there because having that example of Black love, and I think Black Southern love, is what really like shaped me as a young person. And it's interesting because we're not a very, and I didn't realize this until I became older and started like making more friends outside of our initial community in college and people I dated, etc., and learning these different expressions of love. We're not a very mushy gushy like, I love you, like jumping on, I love you. But I was reared in a household where we express love just by showing up and through partnership and by seeing, my parents make it through. I know there are times when they had hard times and, and great times, right? And getting through it all. So at 10, 11 years old, like those are all things that I was soaking in. And, being a big sister and growing up in an area as well, right? So think about it. We're from a very blackety black family, household, etc. But we grew up in a very white area, like white suburbs of New Jersey. And so I remember in middle school, I guess 11, you're getting into middle school. Middle school in particular, that's when I started being a little insecure. And so that is when I started being more hyper aware of, oh, wait, like I'm not a super skinny, white girl with blonde straight hair all the time and all these different things. Or and I started to find a way to distinguish myself like in middle school. And so I would be self-conscious about some image things. Kids being kids, had some kids ask me like, oh, like your family only eats like fried chicken and Kool-Aid, like, and this is later in high school, but like had classmates who came to school in like blackface for Halloween. So just setting the context for the environment that we grew up in. And so my decision was, well, you know what? I'm going to show these people that Black people are just beautiful, and I'm gonna beat them at their own game. And so like those are all the things that were going on in my head, like as I was entering middle school. And I'm happy to get into it more, but you could ask me another question.
So is it safe to say like inside your house you felt the safest?
Yes.
But outside is where you felt like the need to defend and protect yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And you being the oldest as well. In the mental health field, it's oldest child syndrome.
Oh yeah, I'm typical rule follower. Like, and my siblings, they're fine with me saying this. I think, it's funny because my brother and I are probably more like just like more laid back in that way. And then my sister and I growing up, we butt heads a little bit. We were always all really close. So I think you have like all of those dynamics going on. But yeah, certainly that oldest child, that's a real thing. The oldest child syndrome. And like to this day, and I love my brother and sister so much. And I learned so much from them because one, like the thing that I appreciate most about them is they both, and it's funny, they're twins, but they both uniquely march to the beat of their own drum unapologetically. And I'm like, man, like, I wish I could do that, but no, I'm very much a rule follower. I've been trying to break out of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got you. What's up, y'all? If y'all like with this conversation that we've been having, the inner circle, man, first of all, if you want to be a guest, feel free to hit us up, man. We're going to look into your credentials, see who you are. If you fit the criteria, then feel free to sit down on this couch right here, the hot seat. And another thing, like, subscribe, and lock in with us on all social media platforms, Our Friendly Advice. And to visit our website is ourfriendlyadvice.net. You can book us there. Y'all enjoy the rest of your day.